Welcome, everybody. My name is Mark Moyer, and you're watching Lunch with an Expert, and we are in the Win Again Lounge today, and I'm super fired up to have James Hilovsky here today. This guy is an expert in the franchise space. He can answer every single question we've got and tell us a little bit more about some of the myths that are involved and with franchising, because most people seem to think the wrong stuff. And I'd like to invite you in, James, and so why don't you go ahead and come on in. But he is the CEO of the Fran Dream, and he's been doing this for a while. He's also had his own franchise for a bit. So thanks for joining us today, James. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for the time. Appreciate that.
Of course. So, every time I read Entrepreneur Magazine, part of me gets excited because I go halfway through the magazine and then I hit the franchise section and I know I can toss it because I don't own a franchise. And I know that's not what you want to hear, but what that also tells me is that there's a whole half of the magazine that Entrepreneur dedicates each week to I'm sorry, each month to franchising. So it's obviously a huge, huge thing. But I think the average person out there has no idea what's involved with franchising. So I think a lot of what you have to do probably is the education part, right? But before we get into that, do me a favor and just give me sort of a quick 30-second, minute long background on what got you to this place and what was it that inspired you to want to be involved with, uh, the franchising space.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. So growing up, I played baseball. Was a baseball player. Went into the Phillies minor league system, and I was there for a little bit. I grew up in a very small town, so then I was a big fish from a small pond. Went to a minor league system and like, oh my gosh, these guys are just amazing. And one day, just kind of threw my arm out. So came back and go, okay, that's not my dream. So what's my dream? So I worked during high school into the restaurant business. So then I got involved with Del Taco, which is a pretty big chain
Yeah.
out here on the West Coast, and it's
Mhm.
making its way across. So I spent 20 years with Del Taco, regional director, running their operations. I was doing really well there, but a company called Pyology Pizzeria, they called me and said, "Hey, we want someone to come over and run our franchise side and help develop the stores and help develop the franchise development." I said, great. So I went over and helped them with the franchise operations when they had one store, which, for those of you who don't know, Pyology was the first of its kind, and Blaze Pizza was in our dining room and ripped us off, the concept. But so I was with the franchise side, and we helped build that over to 100 franchise stores. So supporting franchisees, and then I went on and was going, well, this is kind of cool. And then the largest franchisee that was owned by two football players, they asked me to come over and be a part of their organization and help with their organization, run their operations, have a little part of ownership. So we had 10 Pyology franchises, and then we developed our very own ice cream concept, as well as we owned another franchise called the Baked Bear. So those things were going really good. We were growing, and then one of our players, he retired, and the other one, he got cut, and it was like, okay, we're not going to grow anymore. So what do I do? Well, it was like, okay, let's just part, and I need to do something on my own, and I want to look for a franchise business. So I was looking for a different franchise business, and then I just was working with someone who does what I do, a franchise broker, and I said, I'd really like to do that because I could help so many people find the right business and right match. But I also really love to work with athletes. So that's going to be my niche. And so that's kind of where I got to 2 years ago to doing this now.
That's amazing. And so and it makes perfect sense because it's clearly a very it's a smart career progression. You've developed a long history of expertise in the franchise space, and now why not advise in that space? So tell the watchers, the listeners, the audience, what are some of the important things to consider if you want to, well, this is going to take forever, so maybe we'll do one at a time. But
Mhm.
for example, I might say, gee, I couldn't imagine being able to afford a Dunkin' Donuts or a Orange Theory gym or a whatever it might be. What do you tell people when they say, is there a minimum amount that I need to have, or how does that work?
Yeah, so there is a minimum amount that you definitely need to have, and if you're shooting, because a lot of times that's what someone will come to me. I want to own a Dunkin' Donuts. I want to own a Burger King. That's what they know.
Yeah.
It's like, well, that investment's going to cost you millions of dollars, probably not have the territory, and they're going to want you to do a development deal. Most of the
Mm.
franchises that I work with are very established brands, but brands that also have territory available or they're emerging. So typically, a rule of thumb is if you have $50,000 of liquid cash and can get funding, which there's many programs out there, FBA, of about to 150,000, you could get into a good franchise system. It just kind of depends on your wants and needs and goals. For instance, I had a player that was a minor league baseball player, so he didn't make a lot of cash, but he had some change, and he wanted to own his own business rather than to get a job.
Yeah.
And by the way, I think the reason why I love athletes with franchises because they're used to following a playbook all their lives. A franchise business model, the franchisor gives you a playbook and you follow it. So it's a great. They're naturals. So this baseball player, he got into a franchise for about 70,000 all in. And this
Okay.
franchise, all they do is they sell they help fundraisers. So he talks to high school coaches and organizations, which is natural because he's used to talking with coaches all his life. So there's different ways, but about 125 is a good starting range.
And so obviously you mentioned it can be financed and so forth too. But now it it takes I mean, look, the profit generation takes a little while. It doesn't happen overnight, I'm assuming.
Depends on the system you're in. Sometimes it takes up to a year. Sometimes 2 years to get your investment back. Sometimes it's 3 months. It really kind of depends on where you're going. If you're looking in restaurants, you're looking at probably a little bit longer. And restaurants, by the way, are one of the most expensive investment levels.
Would you consider them to be the most sort of risky, either upside or downside?
Yeah, there's a lot of it's a boomer bust in some ways with the restaurant. A little bit risky, but very very rewarding. But very one thing from the restaurant business and knowing that if someone has never been in the restaurant business and wants to go in the restaurant business, I would say, wow, you got to be prepared to want to work weekends, nights, and it's a grind. Rewarding, but it is a grind.
Yeah. Now, so with athletes, do you find that do they skew towards a certain type of franchise,
Yes.
or do you
So
skew them towards that, or what's it?
So what I do with every client is that I just figure out their wants and needs, their budget, the industries that they like, and do you want to have an owner operator model, a passive model, or do you want to have the franchisor run the business? So
Mm,
those are kind of factors to use, and then kind of get their goals, and then match them to different franchises that interest them. So the athletes, it's usually a gym, an esports gaming, or health and wellness, chiropractor office, muscle recovery. That's usually kind of along the lines of an athlete.
gotcha. So how does right now, because I spoke to somebody earlier today and they had no idea that you exist, meaning what you do for a living, franchise brokering or however you term it, right? Pairing up people and and most people again also don't know about what this means to own a franchise and whatnot. How can you, or how do you get the word out, or do you, or how do people find out about people like you?
That's a great question because before I did this, and even being in the franchise industry, I didn't really know we existed either. So the way to get the word out is obviously networking, franchise broker, but usually a lot of leads are developed through franchise portals where people go search for franchise options. And if you put
Mhm.
in an inquiry there, you're actually going to get to a franchise broker that's going to be able to help you with your questions. So it's kind of like lead gen. So that's kind of how you get to be known. I personally do that and then I have a marketing team that searches for candidates through Google Ads and different click options.
And have you found that those are fairly effective, like that, because it seems like, I personally, and I'm just speaking out of my own experiences, but I found that sometimes, especially, advertising, whether it's social media, et cetera, is very expensive and often leads to some pretty random results. To me, I've always felt that obviously I'm biased because I run, we have the Clubroom events, but I've found that sometimes the one-on-one networking leads to people in their network that would be interested, that sort of thing. What's been your experience on customer acquisition?
100% networking is the best and viable way to do that. I just figured I was going to hit the lead gen when I first started my business, just to kind of get some clients and whatnot. But I get much more traction, have you say, with networking events. I do a lot of golf tournaments where there's athletes that I try to be at, and just networking there. And I find that is my most effective networking. Than I mean, for me, it's a necessary evil of sorts of always building that pipe of doing some sort of social media. So I still do some, but I do prefer the networking aspect.
But it must be horrible to have to be forced to play golf all the time. I don't even know how you do that. It must be.
Yeah, it's awful. It's awful. It's just terrible.
I don't know if I can use that as a strategy for my business, but maybe we'll see. Now, in terms of the types of opportunities and so forth, I'm assuming, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but is there a limit to the types of opportunities you can represent, or can you represent virtually any franchisee?
So I'm part of a network where I have over 400 franchise brands that I have in my network. So that's at my fingertips. I'll just give you an example of something though. I had a football player. We were going through all these brands, and I was working for him for about 3 months. And then he said, James, you know what? I have my business. I'm just going to stick in that. I'm good with it. And I said, okay, that's great. And he calls me a day later and says, you know what I want? This is what I want. I want a franchise that deals with TMS treatment, mental health issues, addiction. That's what I want. And I said, okay, give me a day. So I went out and searched different companies out there and found one that was a franchise, and he signed the deal this month with that franchise. So if a client tells me something I don't have in my inventory, I'll try to find it for him, and because that's what he wants, and his goal is to put one of these in every NFL city.
Oh, that's fantastic. But that's good to hear, because there are some people that I've spoken to that are limited, or they set their own limits on what they can go after. So it's good to hear that you can. So if I said to you, for example, I've always wanted to have a really cool petting zoo. Can you find me somebody that can do that? I mean, you could find.
I would try to find that. Well, all right, as of right now, I had a client that said he wanted like a Top Golf, and Top Golf is about 12 to 14 million dollar venture. So
Wow.
what I'm trying to do now, another thing that I do besides what I do, is I help businesses that want to become a franchise model. I help them turn their model into a franchise business. So right now, I'm searching for companies that are indoor golf simulators, that they have a business that they're looking to franchise, because that typically probably in for that for about 500K, and you have the indoor golf, and you have a bar, restaurant slash. There's several of those over the country. So I'm trying to get one of those to franchise so I can present that to my clients.
I actually have an introduction I can make for you, but that will do off afterwards here. But that's really fascinating. So in terms of the next steps on how do you so I mean, I'm assuming you have sort of an intake kind of like meeting with people, and you sort of, like, let's say I said to you I was interested in franchising, but I have no idea what, but I like the idea of being a passive investor, a passive owner, I suppose, and of having something across the street or wherever the heck it is. You have a series of questions, I guess, you run through just to sort of interview me and to make sure that's even in my appetite?
Yes, absolutely. So one thing is, if you're not an athlete and I'm working with you, I'll give you a personality test, the Zoracle. And what that does, that shows me your strengths and weaknesses. Hey, you're really great at marketing, you're great at networking, but your skill set as far as accounting's a little bit low. Okay, so that kind of helps me as well. Then I'm going to ask you your goals. What are you looking to do? Are you looking to keep your job? Are you looking to exit your job right now? Are you looking to do something, get it up and going, and then come into the business? And then let's talk about what you're spending. What is your budget? Is your budget, is it doable? And then just over those basic questions, like what are you trying to get out of life? And just kind of get to know you and get to know
Mm.
you as a person, because it's all about a relationship, and to build that trust where you can tell me what you want to do in 5 years, and I'll help you find that right franchise match.
Now, do you recommend for or against, um, let's say, friends or teammates to come together to do one? Let's say, let's say I say to you, "Oh, hey, listen, I'm retired, played in the NHL. I got two of my hockey buddies. We all want to go in on something." Do you say that's a good thing or not a good thing, or how do you feel about it?
Um, it can be a good thing. It can be a very bad thing. I'm actually working with three ex NBA players right now, and I get on a Zoom call with them. One guy wants to do this franchise, one guy wants to do this one. So they're right now having a hard time trying to agree with what franchise they want to go with. And I'm just thinking, wow, I wonder if they actually agree on this, how are they going to agree on the business? And I think if maybe they step back and they were a group and they get a manager in place and they go, we're just going to be the guys that are just running the business. We're not going to be in the day to day. They're going to be fine.
Mm,
They'll be fine.
right.
But if they all three try to run the business, no.
Yeah, and I guess that's got to be a key thing because I think at face value, if you have a couple of friends and oh, we all get along so great, this will be great. But
Mhm.
I think sometimes it's a recipe for disaster or something. Where you're right. I think that look, athletes especially have very strong personalities, and they may feel that they know a lot of stuff and or want to prove that they know a lot of stuff. So maybe it may be challenging to put a few together. I don't know, but they can also pool their resources better that way. So I guess that's interesting.
Exactly.
So right now today, um, do you find that as you're representing these people and as you're getting involved with some of these different franchises, I mean, I'm assuming it's tempting for you to get involved with some of them, right? Or what's your story?
Every day. It's always
Yeah.
something that it's like, I really want to do this, and yes, and yeah, all the time it comes up where I really want to get involved with this franchise. So I have a great thing that's kind of holding me back where I don't. It's because my son is a freshman football player out here in California in his high school. So would not want to open a business in California. So he graduates
Ooh,
in
why
three.
not? What,
Oh,
give me one reason.
I'm not saying you can't be successful, because you can be very successful in California. But me personally, I would rather open it in another state. And he
Yeah.
graduates in 3 years, and then I'll be moving to another state. And then I probably would try to do probably two different franchises right now.
Yeah. Are we
Yeah.
allowed to get any hints or not really?
Well, one would be the QC Kinetics, which is a regeneration therapy that's open one day a week that just
Yeah.
has incredible numbers. And I think I can manage one day a week and 5 hours to 10 hours a week doing that. So
Well,
and
can I ask you a question? I mean, why is it only open one day a week? What I mean, would they double their business if they were open, Mondays and Fridays, or not necessarily?
So the whole key behind that, it's open one day a week because it's kind of like that restaurant that's always busy and packed. You're going to want to go to that restaurant, but if no one's in that restaurant, you're not going to want to go to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's kind of their philosophy. And two, the physicians that are there, that's a side job for them. So it's a great side job because it's one day a week. So they don't
Right.
have to give up their regular job. So it just makes staffing and all that easier. Now you can open the clinic up longer if you would like to, but
Hmm.
you just have to make sure that you're going to have different. You just have to make sure the demand's there.
That's interesting, though. It reminds me of here in New York. We have on one hand we've got diners that when you go to a diner here, I'm sure everywhere, there's 400 things on the menu. But there's a restaurant here in New York that I can't remember if it was called Burger and Lobster or something, but literally two things on the menu: burgers and lobsters, and you get one or the other, and that's it. And I thought that was brilliant because what you're getting at that restaurant, and if you're still going there, that's what you want, and it's perfect. I love that.
And I'll get things like that when you say about franchises. There's a franchise that decides, hey, we've been in business for 10 years. We just decided we were going to franchise, and now we want to blow up across the US. So there's a restaurant that's trying to do that, and they're asking for no royalties for the first 2 years just to grow. So if you're looking for a restaurant, that would be a great investment model because you don't have to pay royalties for 2 years.
Wow. Now, right now, to give me an idea of what you consider to be a couple of the biggest myths about franchising that, everybody seems to think of, they associate something with franchising, but it's actually the complete opposite.
Yeah, the franchising, you get charged all these fees and it's just not worth it. And well, what I would say to you is, where are you going to go when you're on a team? 'Cause you're a team when you're a franchisee. So if you're having a problem, you can pick up the phone and call anybody that's in your same shoes. And I think the biggest part about starting a business is starting a business.
Yeah.
Getting the startup. How do I do this? How do I start this business? That's where the franchise is so important, and will help you off to a right start. You only get one chance to start a business, and the franchise kicks you off the right way and gives you that ongoing support. So I often say, okay, you want to go start your own business. They fail twice as much as a franchise business. And then let me ask you this. You're talking about the fees. I get it. Would you rather own 100% of $200,000, or would you rather own 10% of $1 million? So there you go. If you want to make $1 million and pay 10% away for all that support, I think that's what I would choose. I would choose the franchise instead of 200 of my own.
Absolutely. Now, there's a few myths that I've heard. I mean, I think that it's interesting, at least, I think sometimes the perception is the franchise owner is really putting in significant hours, and they've got their family working there and everything. And I think a lot of times people just don't know what's involved with it. But there is, as you've mentioned, the ability to either be fully immersed, partially immersed, or not immersed at all in it, kind of thing, just being the person cutting the checks kind of thing, or receiving the checks, I guess.
Yeah.
Is there a like a breakdown of how many people do each? I mean, is there like, do majority people want to be fully immersed, or majority want to? How's it work?
Majority kind of want to be fully immersed, and the big takeaway is that I hear a lot from professionals is, I'm tired of making other people money. I want to make it for myself. And they get into the business, and even though sometimes it is a 50-hour a week if you're owner operator sometimes, and especially in the beginning, but you're going, my payoff is I'm doing this for myself, and
Right.
it's mine, and I have this asset that's going to produce for me. And I know that as I get older, I'm not going to get fired to get someone younger to come in. I know that I'm not going to get sexually harassed or anything that goes on in the workplace. I control my own environment. I pick my own team, so I don't have that idiot next to me in the cubicle. I really think that to do a grind in your own business is way worth it. And, as with the franchise business as well, you can pass that on to your children. You can sell it. You can sell it and get a different, bigger, better franchise, in your opinion, if that's what you want. It's yours. And, that's the joy. And what it does, it provides that freedom.
Well, you're right. I mean, look, and I guess, in your opinion, I mean, I'm assuming if I bought a fill in the blank franchise 5 years ago, and then let's say this year I've decided, look, I need to consolidate, I need to blah blah blah. I mean, there's a market, so I mean, I may not necessarily get completely killed on it, or I may do quite well on it, I suppose. So there's two ways to look at it. Now, one of the last questions I want to ask you is, in your opinion, and I don't think anybody will be too concerned about your answer in a bad way, but are there any sectors or areas that you think you'd avoid?
Well, one that I typically do not show is, and it is a good business, but it's vending. So someone wants to get into vending, it is usually something I do not show. only because, and there's a great vending operator out there. When you talk vending, you're probably talking an investment of about $2,000 of per machine that you're buying into, uh, and you're going to have to probably get about 25 to 30 of those to get a income of 60 to $100,000, which doesn't sound bad. It's just the vending part is just it's just kind of a grind, really, of trying to find locations, and you're going to have to move the machines a lot, and you don't realize all the storage that you have to store all the products. So, not that I'm saying it's a bad business, but I've never really. I don't really show vending, but if one of my clients said I would love to get into be the vending machine master, of course I would show it to them.
It's funny. I guess I never realized that that was a franchise thing. I just assumed all along that those vending machines were owned by the wherever they were. So that's see, learn something new every day. In terms of now what about have you ever considered diving into the world of franchise ownership in sports?
Yes, no, that would be, of course, yeah. So, and that's why when I do mainly when I said I look for businesses that want to come in a franchise model, I usually kind of I go for the sports sector, because really as a franchise right now in sports, you're looking at a sports retail shop, indoor gun shooting simulator, esports, and you have the fitness areas. But if
Yeah.
you're a golfer, really, that's why I was telling you, indoor golf, indoor bowling simulators would be, fantastic.
Hmm.
And the different, a couple of the different people that do kids clubs and teach kids skills and that needs there's a couple of those franchises out there, but I think there's a big room for more sports franchises.
Interesting. What about teams, like minor league teams, like a single A team or something? That's a little bit different, obviously, but is that something that you'd ever tee up opportunities in? Or
Yes,
is
I
that
would definitely tee up opportunities in that. I actually have had several people that have come to me and said, "Hey, do you know an investor that would like to be part of our team?" And
mm,
that's very intriguing. And yes, absolutely.
we'll have to talk about that too afterwards. But look, before I jump any further, I think that this whole sector again, I think most people don't know that you exist or didn't know. How do you think or actually I've got a recommendation for you, and I don't know how much you use it or not, but I think if you were while you're on a platform like a LinkedIn where I know you have a profile, um, but maybe if you started posting some content that says, here are three of the top reasons why people consider franchise ownership, blah blah and blah, or here's something new and interesting in owning floral franchises. I don't know, I'm making this stuff
Mhm.
up. But I think if you started putting more content on LinkedIn where you're coming across as the guy who's providing um, really advice and solutions and tips and strategies, I think that can really grow your exposure and certainly increase engagement. One of the things that I tell people all the time is that whenever there's something I don't know much about, it might be law, it might be financing, it might be whatever. If I see people on social media educating me in any sort of way, I'm drawn to them because I'm thinking, well, if they're taking the time to teach me, I might consider reaching out to them to get their business or I would solicit their business. I mean, I said that backwards. I'd use them if I needed, let's say, a family lawyer or someone in financing or whatever it might be. So that may be something, James, that you consider going forward is maybe starting putting content on the platform that is really just short posts that just say, here's an important factor to consider if you wanted to finance a new blah blah blah, or here's something to consider, and just advice, not necessarily because I know you probably need to be a little careful with some of the things you say, but maybe just make it very general, but then have something at the bottom that says, if you'd like to know more, if you'd like to discuss this, please reach out to me anytime. You can reach me here and so forth. I think you might find that if you get people stirred up and engaged, that might increase at least the interactions with you. Just
No,
saying.
I appreciate you saying that, and I actually have had those conversations with the marketing team that helps me, and that's actually what they suggested to do as well. So I do appreciate that, but I think you're spot on that. Yes.
Excellent. Oh, so you're paying them and you're not paying me? What the heck? I'm kidding.
Exactly.
Anyways, so look, this has been fantastic. What I'm going to do is we're going to make sure that everybody's able to see this recording, because this has really been not just an eye opener, but very informative, and clearly you know your stuff. I think I'd feel very, very comfortable um, with these types of opportunities, as long as I know you're at the helm of sort of holding the hands of the franchisee and the franchisor. How is this something where once you connect to, do you try to stay on top of it a little bit, or do you just feel comfortable passing it on, or how do you, let's say I did something last year, I bought a couple franchises with blank. Do you still stay in touch with me to make sure they're going well, or what do you
Yes,
do?
I try to do that. There's some that I have lost engagement. I'm just being honest, but for the most part, yes,
Yeah.
I try to just see, hey, how's it going? You know, how are you doing? And another reason why I do that too is just to go, how is this franchisor once you're in the system? You know, are you feeling good about it? Because that gives me like, well, if they're not feeling good about the franchisor, maybe I don't want to recommend that franchisor anymore. So I always think follow up is always super
Mm,
important.
good. That's great. Well, listen, what's the best way for people to be able to reach out to you?
You could website www.thefrandream.com, LinkedIn, or James at the Fran Dream. And one thing that you know I did not mention, that everything that I do for the client is free. So my charge is totally free. My whole thing, how I get paid, is much like a real estate agent out of the franchisor's marketing budget. So the client doesn't pay any extra fees to use myself either.
Ooh, I like that. That's one of my favorite pricing. That's great. I like that. Well, listen, I really appreciate your time today, James. This has been fantastic. And again, everybody, thefrandream.com is the website, and James at thefrandream.com is the email. So check him out. Also, James Hilovsky on LinkedIn. And thanks so much for your time today, James.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.